is more controlled by corporations?
Yes, it was one way.
Right.
It's the actual participatory two-way that you can talk back to the Android meme. That is the meaning of social media.
Right. That's what. Yeah.
But they don't have the right terms for it. You know, they thought media was not talking to you. Actually, it was a machine that was interrupting your life and making you less social. They did not realize that the analog phase from 1850 to 1990 was a very social interaction. They thought the media was something out there, a monster. And now they're saying, wow, that monster is actually likes us and is going to allow us to talk to it. See, so people don't know. So they don't know. It's the horseless buggy. Horseless, they think it means no horse. They think media are not social. So they call it the breakthrough social media. So it's a rearview mirror name that actually counters understanding of what started off as social. With
yes, and before, when you were talking about the digital prohibition, I was thinking how the artists were doing what the Android meme does now, that they will comment on the effects of media and absorb all the thunders and comment on that, like Joyce and McLuhan and Zappa and you with your chart. It's a new type of art form. Until the Android meme, that was also one of the roles of the artist, to make this metanoia, this exegesis of all the logos, all the outering, and translate them in a work of art. But now the Android meme is taking that role, or took that role.
Yes, exactly. McLuhan saw it in the analog phase. He said the environments, the media environments, are altering people like the artists used to do. The artists would try to make a painting be a teaching machine, and then the radio, TV, and movie environments took over, and they became the teaching machines. Now, what's neat is that McLuhan did perceive the coming Android meme. So the teaching machine in the 30s and 40s was not obvious to people, but you could write about it. Then in 1969, he makes this statement: a rapid series of innovations is an ersatz anti-environment. So an anti-environment is something that's awakening you. If it's not a real anti-environment, a fake anti-environment, it's ersatz. So what is the ersatz anti-environment? A rapid series of innovations. That's what the Android meme brought to people. Endless innovation, 24/7, either in program content or in new kinds of technologies. So McLuhan defines the Android meme as a rapid series of innovations as an ersatz anti-environment. That's a pretty good definition of say, pop culture saying, they live, or the machine came alive, or it turned into a monster. All the street-level definitions or terms to describe what McLuhan laid out technically. And when Zappa says that he's here to do any available visual medium, look at Zappa as speaking as the Android meme. You remember, whenever he presents himself in a play, he's a robot, you know. And the actual Frank Zappa, the creator, remains nameless. He did that in the book Them or Us. So the robotic processing of the Android meme's endless turnover of fads and myths makes you, as a commentator, a robot. But to the degree you understand that, then you can claim some kind of artistic awareness. So the Android meme is a modern artist. It is a collective of surrealists, dadaists, constructivists, pop artists, Duchampians, all the different art forms of the 20th century are what the Android meme does. So that's my long explanation of what you just said, that the artist has been usurped by the Android meme.
Android
I have
meme.
this quote. Yeah. Let me just see if I can find it. There's this great quote by McLuhan from 1960. same version of Understanding Media that he did for the National Educational Broadcasters. So I know I posted it in alt.slack, so we put McLuhan Avant-Garde Art. All my postings are in there. Let's see if that comes up. It doesn't come up. Okay, so I got to come up with, oh no, it is, here's one quote. Not the one I'm looking for, but it's the beginning. So McLuhan considered an artist engaged in a game. He used to call his Monday night seminars a game. And in the Understanding Media, he has a section on games. So you can substitute the word art and media and the Android meme for the word games here. So he says, games are dramatic models of our psychological lives providing release of particular tensions. They are collective and popular art forms with strict conventions. Ancient and non-literate societies naturally regarded games as live dramatic models of the universe or of the outer cosmic drama. The Olympic Games were direct enactment. What?
I'm sorry, I thought that you had finished the quote.
No, I just interruption there. The Olympic Games were direct enactments of the agon or struggle of the sun god. The runners moved around a track adorned with the zodiacal signs in imitation of the daily circuit of the sun chariot. With games and plays that were dramatic enactments of a cosmic struggle, the spectator role was plainly religious. The participation in these rituals kept the cosmos on the right track, as well as providing a booster shot for the tribe. The tribe or the city was a dim replica of that cosmos, as much as were the games, the dances, and the icons. How art became a sort of civilized substitute for magical games and rituals is the story of the detribalization which came with literacy. Art, like games, became a mimetic echo of and relief from the old magic of total involvement. As the audience for the magic games and plays became more individualistic, the role of art and ritual shifted from the cosmic to the humanly psychological, as in Greek drama. Even the ritual became more verbal and less mimetic or dance-like. Finally, the verbal narrative from Homer and Ovid became a romantic literary substitute for the corporate liturgy and group participation. Much of the scholarly effort of the past century, so that'd be like 1850 to 1950, much of the scholarly effort of the past century in many fields has been devoted to a minute reconstruction of the conditions of primitive art and ritual, for it has been felt that this course offers the key to understanding the mind of primitive man. The key to this understanding, says McLuhan, however, is also available in our new electric technology that is so swiftly and profoundly recreating the conditions and attitudes of primitive tribal man in ourselves. The wide appeal of the games of recent times, the popular sports of baseball and football and ice hockey, seen as outer models of inner psychological life, become understandable. As models, they are collective rather than private dramatizations of inner life. Like our vernacular tongues, all games are media of interpersonal communication, and they could have neither existence nor meaning except as extensions of our immediate inner lives. If we take a tennis racket in hand or 13 playing cards, we consent to being part of a dynamic mechanism in an artificially contrived situation. Is this not the reason we enjoy those games most that mimic other situations in our work and social lives? Do not our favorite games provide a release from the monopolistic tyranny of the social machine? In a word, does not Aristotle's idea of drama as a mimetic reenactment and relief from our besetting pressures and in a word, does not Aristotle's idea of drama as a mimetic reenactment and relief from our besetting pressures apply perfectly to all kinds of games and dance and fun? For fun or games to be welcome, they must convey an echo of workaday life. On the other hand, a man or society without games is one sunk in the zombie trance of the automaton, or the zombie trance of the automation. I don't know which word he means. Art and games enable us to stand aside from the material pressures of routine and convention, observing and questioning. Games as popular art forms offer to all an immediate means of participation in the full life of a society, such as no single role or job can offer to any man. A job or role doesn't provide that anymore. The whole expansion of games and entertainment is necessary for awareness. Hence the contradiction in professional sport. Yes, professional in quotes. When the game's door opening into the free life leads into a merely specialist job, everybody senses an incongruity. So he's talking about when people become professional athletes, there's something a little off. When the game's door opening into the free life leads, in other words, if you are enjoying your games in whatever community you're involved in, weekly baseball league, but then you turn professional, you become a specialist. And people say there's something off about this. So that's what he's saying. Hence the contradiction in professional sport. When the game's door, which opens into the free life, leads into a merely specialist job, everybody senses an incongruity. The games of a people reveal a great deal about them. Games are a sort of artificial paradise like Disneyland, or some utopian vision by which we interpret and compete and complete the meaning of our daily lives. In games, we devise means of non-specialized participation in the larger drama of our time. But for civilized man, the idea of participation is strictly limited. Not for him the depth participation that erases the boundaries of individual awareness, as in the Indian cult of Darshan, the mystic experience of the physical presence of vast numbers of people. A android meme is a machine that can get into action only if the players consent to become puppets for a time. For individualist Western man, much of his adjustment to society has the character of a personal surrender to the collective demands. Our android meme helps both to teach us this kind of adjustment and also to provide a release from it. The uncertainty of the outcomes of our android meme games makes a rational excuse for the mechanical rigor of the rules and procedures of the game. So I substitute android meme there, so I'll reread it as it was written in Understanding Media, pages 237, 238. The MIT Press edition. A game is a machine that can get into action only if the players consent to becoming puppets for a time. For individualist Western man, much of his adjustment to society has the character of a personal surrender to the collective demands. That's since the printing press. Our games help both to teach us this kind of adjustment and also to provide a release from it. The uncertainty of the outcomes of our contests makes a rational excuse for the mechanical rigor of the rules and procedures of the game. So, isn't that pretty neat? How's that for an in-depth explanation of the android meme via games and art, entertainment?
Yes, it's wonderful. And McLuhan saw that even theology in the electric environment is what he called a game people play, because he said when God becomes theory, God dies. And we cannot explain this thing, as he called this, what we will say, physical. And yes, this odyssey of that were commented by McLuhan and Zappa take us to this point of the post-digital
prohibition.
So
post-digital.
Exhaustion? How do you say?
Implosion.
No, I'm falling asleep.
You're saying digital explosion?
No, fatigue. Like
participation.
We are extortion.
Extension?
No. Okay.
Okay. What's the concept you're trying to talk about?
Yes, we're in this point of saturation, of fatigue.
Fatigue, chronic fatigue.
Yes, that everybody is outering and all types of creations and
Millennial ecstatic.
We get together in Christmas to watch our cell phones together, but and post, yes,
that's social media. So people had cell phones in Web 1.0. Then Web 2.0 came along, and it was nice and friendly, and they could walk around with their iPhones, and they could continue texting, but could do it with other people. So yes, people get together in social life together. They get together today to sit and engage their private chip body in a group. That's what you experience. They socialize the atomized experience of chip body communication.
Yes, and this whole study of medias, of the logos, brought McLuhan to try to
break down. To break down.
Yes, and at the end, he could not explain the thingness.
The thingness, right. The thingness of the thingfish.
Yes, and the thing that Ian came somehow to solve and to explain after all these explorations.
Okay, so listen to this. This is the right. You mentioned art. I'm going to give McLuhan's statement in 1960. I found it. What's Bob's archive? Bob's archive is on altslack.com or whatever it is, the fan site for the Church Subgenius, where I put all my quotes. I got like 15,000 quotes on there. So I just had to find it. So here it is. McLuhan wrote this in 1960. It is quite literally true that since printing... Okay, Cal, you want to mute? Okay. It is quite literally true that since printing, it has been the poets and painters who have explored and predicted the various possibilities of print, of prints, of press, of telegraph, of photograph, movie, radio, and television. In recent decades, the arrival of several new media had led to prodigious experimentation in the arts. So he's talking about 1910 to 1950. But at present, let's say 1940s, before World War II. So in recent decades, the arrival of several new media had led to prodigious experimentation in the arts. But at present, the artists have yielded to the media themselves. Experimentation has passed from the control of the private artists to the groups in charge of the new technologies. So that's the advertising agencies and the intelligence agencies. That is to say that whereas in the past the individual artist manipulating private and inexpensive materials, writing, pencil, pen, quill, painting materials, stone, so manipulating private and inexpensive materials, the artist was able to shape models of new experience years ahead of the public. So that's the way it was. Whereas today, the artist works with an expensive, not inexpensive materials, works with expensive public technology. And the artist and public merge in a single experience. The new media need the best artist talent and can pay for it. But the artist can no longer provide years of advanced awareness of developments in the patterns of human experience which will inevitably emerge from new technological development. So he's saying it was slower 100, 200, 300 years ago. So when new technology slowly came in, the artist could predict the effects, the services and disservices of the new invisible technology. But it's been such rapid turnover in the 20th century that the artist cannot make predictions about what's going to happen to people. He doesn't have any time to do it because that technology that's causing a new stress of anticipation or prediction is obsolesced pretty quickly by the next technology. So I'm going to read that again. Experimentation has passed from the control of the private artist to the groups in charge of the new technology. That's the tetrad managers. That is to say that whereas in the past the individual artist manipulating private and inexpensive materials was able to shape models of new experience years ahead of the public, today, the artist works with expensive public technology, but the artist and public merge in a single experience. There's no gap of spans of time or of timing for someone to say this is what's coming. The new media need the best artist The new media need the best. The Android meme needs the best artist and the Android meme needs the best artistic talent and can pay for it. But the artist can no longer provide, look at that, the artist can no longer provide years of advanced awareness of developments in the patterns of human experience, which will inevitably emerge from new technological development. So who is an artist? Anybody's an artist today. You get on the Today Show, you're Justin Bieber, you make a video when you're 12 years old. You get on the Today Show, all the teenagers decide that you did this on your own, Mr. Bieber. You weren't corporately sponsored, so we're going to like you. So he becomes an anti-environment for the teenagers for a few months until he blows it, and then he says a few words that counters his image, and then he's ostracized. And we were on the Maui cruise last night, where you go out and look at whales, and so Marty Dreads is singing all the songs. Everybody's dancing. And this little she was about 9 years old, demanded that Marty Dread, who's mainly a reggae guy, but he can do all the regular hits of pop music for the last 50 years. She demands him to do a Justin Bieber song. Now, here's a 9-year-old. Justin Bieber, he was Big 8 years ago, and then blew it, and I don't know what status he's basically made fun of. But this little girl is going through the technological evolution, and she's just arriving at 2009, and she wants Bieber. That's her guy, and she wants this Marty to do it. Did he ever do it, Carol?
I don't know.
Yeah, he did he wouldn't do it right away. He did a couple other songs first. But there was a couple of songs I didn't recognize. That might have been a Justin Bieber song, but I didn't know that it was. But I saw the little kid screaming for their art environment. You get what I'm saying, Roxy?
Yeah.
And it's rearview mirror for anybody who's aware of what's going on in pop music, in 2015. But this little girl, she had arrived at the Justin Bieber phase of Bob's chart. The Dobbs quadrant. So that was just an interesting thing I was observing. Now, McLuhan said in 1973, he updated his statement about the media and the artists. He says, the new art form of our time is the media themselves. Now, he says that back in 1960. At present, the artists have yielded to the media themselves. But now McLuhan is saying the media themselves are art forms. That means they're obsolete. When something is an art form, it's not part of the present. The new art form of our time is the media themselves, not painting, not movies, not drama, but the media themselves have become the new art forms. Then he says, I write cartoons. I've wanted to write a play for a long time on the media, and the media themselves are the avant-garde areas of our society. Avant-garde in the art world no longer exists in painting and music and poetry. It's in the media themselves. Then he says, it's not in the programs, not in the media content. Avant-garde is not in hockey, not in baseball, or any of these entertainments. Pop critics like Richard Meltzer, they started celebrating wrestling and that in the 70s because they were sick of what happened in the music industry. He didn't think it was worth reviewing, so he did, and he started doing that right around 1973. Maybe he was reading McLuhan and he missed this sentence because Richard Meltzer goes for the media content. And McLuhan is aware that you can make that mistake. The avant-garde is not in hockey. They didn't teach you this in school, in art school, did they, Roxy? That hockey was the avant-garde. Avant-garde is not in hockey, not in baseball, or in any of these entertainments. It's in the media themselves. So if it's not the separate media, but in the media themselves, that means the process of a rapid series of innovations that is an ersatz and environment. So that's the background of his statements leading up to that definition of the Android meme. So that
yes, and with
sermon.
With the Web
Go ahead.
2.0, everybody's in show business 24 hours. And
well, it's not even in show business. Let's update that. Show business is what everybody was. I mean, Rod Stewart and these guys did songs in the 70s and 80s saying everybody's a star, everybody's in showbiz. Showbiz is not where we're at anymore. There is no showbiz. There's no communication. There's no audience. There's no creator. That's the big void that frightens people. And then Ian comes in. So maybe we can get a word.
I'm using that word as a joke. Because even before in the electric environment, Frank Zappa said the most important person in show business is the drug dealer in his place.
Right, the drug dealer. I know, Bert. I know he's here, Carol. We're bringing him in. Bert is making Bert is making his glorious showbiz entry. Bert comes and sits at the couch, at the talk show couch, to promote his latest movie and non-artistic experiment in an attempt to communicate to nobody. And what are you here to celebrate? What are you here to promote, Bert?
I've been listening for like the last hour and 15 minutes. It's been a fascinating discussion. I was blown away earlier when you were talking about how McLuhan and Zappa could sense what was going on in the discarnate state and electric environment and how they both reacted in opposite ways. The same way, but, you know.
And opposite. The same and opposite.
Same and opposite.
Interplaying. Yeah, tactile. They take one side or the other, but could switch to the other side. They were both tactile.
Yeah. And that was so clear. It's so clear. And also the one thing that was really fascinating, you said that they sensed that you couldn't have physical laws in the electric environment. And you made the point to try to express that to someone now, or back in 1910 to current, they wouldn't be able to understand that. It's because they're hypnotized. That's fascinating. And then also, which hit home for me, is a professional athlete is a specialist, and you see that from whatever professional sport, that they're all developed to be specialists in a lost world.
Yeah, in a lost world.
Yes.
Oh, very good. The what is it you were saying there? The
you were updating the concept of show business.
Right. So you were talking about the just before the athlete, the
physical laws in the electric environment.
So my chart is a picture of the Android meme. And the Android meme presented a rapid series of innovations. Holeopathic, shrinking radio, shrinking computer, shrinking TV, shrinking satellite. The figures of that, the anthropomorphic projections, were Zappa, McLuhan, LaRouche. All the people named on my chart are agents of the Android meme. They are an expression of the rapid series of innovations. See, this is the hidden part of that.
Yes.
In a way, your chart is like you say, you're the curator of the thunders. What was important for each thunder, for each technology.
And I have that categorized as God, sex, politics, consciousness, and Orphic Baroque spirals. There's 5 major memic categories. Now, both Zappa and McLuhan were accused of being robotic. And they themselves would say that they knew they were an extension of something, that they were being set up themselves. So the modern avant-garde, really avant-garde artists who understood the Android meme would know the silliness of the position you are in, even though you're famous for offering awareness. See? Remember in Them or Us? Zappa is describing himself as a robot, a ridiculous robot. That's what the journalists say about him. You have to appear robotic if you're going to be a really good artist, in the last 50 years. You have to be so cold and detached and not involved in any of the local departments of academia or specialisms, not a member. McLuhan and Zappa weren't members, even though they were engaged, all of them, and were invited to be part of all of them, but always maintained their autonomy, therefore looking like robots. They both were accused of that. Even Walter Bower said to me, I bet you when McLuhan died that they did an autopsy on him and they found that there was a whole mechanical apparatus in his fucking skull. So I knew Walter had not gotten it yet, because he was subject to the robotic taboo. You know, he didn't know that McLuhan had to be a robot. That's why Zappa replays a lot of his themes, his music. He replays them in different media, just like McLuhan, as Roxy pointed out, writes the same book, and each sub-book is part of the one book, just like Zappa's music is part of the one album. They actually are lazy. They don't spend too much time making up new stuff. They just grab something, since they were so prolific a long time ago. They just look into their archive, bring it out, and comment on whatever the fad or myth is of the day. It's a mechanical process what they do.
Yes, that's how the do line. That's why
I think
going over the do line.
They were both aware, really, of.
Wait a minute. Let's see what Bert. What are you saying? Let's see what Bert's saying. What are you saying about the do line, Bert?
That was like with McLuhan. Every time that we read a do line, it was like a repeat.
It was the same fucking thing. Yeah. He was so lazy. He was not doing what he said he was doing. Oh, we'll keep you up to date and everything. We'll be aware of the new changes. And he just fucking used the same formula every issue. So what were you going to say, Roxy?
Yes, the really deep meaning of the slogan, the medium is the message. It's not about the content, but it's the medium.
And the medium that they're using. When McLuhan wants to write a play.
And this is iron too, like...
Yes.
The non-physical is both medium and message. It's really amazing how we go through all this odyssey to talk with the non-physical. And the non-physical is the message. The non-physical is the explanation of all these genesis, all these thunders.
Yeah, all the extensions. Thunders as extensions. Now, it was interesting explaining some of the aspects of Ion to our guests. You know, we are entertaining our foster daughter and her children. So these are my foster grandkids. And after a few nights with me, they declared to their parents that Bob, and they include Carolyn, but Bob was the figure, and they said, Bob is the most amazing human being we'll ever meet. They were not saying, I ever met. They will ever meet. And now, it was interesting, just telling them a few of the ionic facts of what it is dealing with ion, they had their minds so blown that they occasionally had to take breaks. They had to go off in the corner and vomit or throw up or something. But
yes, because it's watching. Like now it's not a lifetime, but the whole eternity. So
Right. And so why did I bring this up? There was something. I was interested watching how their perceptual apparatus. They couldn't. It was impossible. They never heard the idea that heaven came forth and is now talking to us. Like no one, until I say it, you never heard that idea. These aren't entities talking. This is the environment of heaven that you die into. The environment itself came forth to talk. That's what by Roxy's saying. We are talking to non-physical. Yeah. It's an environment. What a preposterous notion. But when you read McLuhan and Zappa, go ahead.
This is the wonderful thing that even the non-physical learn how to speak to create.
Yeah, they had to.
The cloud.
Yes, the cloud had to adapt. Nobody gets out of here dead. There's the old phrase, nobody gets out here alive, but that's not right. Nobody gets out here dead. Even the android meme had to adjust to the new situation. I mean, Ion had to adjust to the new situation, and they had to become what they weren't. They had to probe.
Yes,
So let me see, what else? Yeah, go ahead.
The healing anti-environment.
The what? The healing?
We arrived at the healing anti-environment, or the balancing act. That
Yeah, better to use the word balancing act.
Yes.
We're not allowed to use the word healing. I will not show up if we talk about healing. But back to this thing
I'm
about...
being ironic.
Yes, good. What would we just say? So Bert was amazed at the similarity, the interplay. Oh, yeah. So I'm stressing now that to be a serious artist, you have to recognize you begin with failure. McLuhan had a chapter on understanding media. The first 7 chapters are broad themes, and one of them is the challenge and collapse, the nemesis of creativity. So he was saying you can be creative as you want, but there's too many factors that you won't be able to avoid collapse. And then Zappa writes in his autobiography how much of a failure he was, and that I don't know if he said failure is no problem, but he did say that he suffered the nemesis of creativity, challenge and collapse. So that's a good level of honesty there. So you have to include the fact that you're not going to be successful as an artist, as a scientist, unless you work with non-physical, because non-physical will deal with the big part of the world you can't handle or you can't see. It's the only way you can survive the nemesis of creativity is working with the creative swimming pool itself.
Yes, and it's very interesting how the android meme tries to become human, and Ion comes and explains humans are actually gods. So the android meme is actually trying to be God, and then the non-physical is trying to be God also, to be what we do, to create with the logos.
So the android meme is trying to make you God, but dependent on it, so you get it by default. I encountered saying, well, yes, we can make you a God, even better than what the android meme can do, but we can do it if you start with the premises you already are, and there's nothing much that you have to do. The android meme is making an effort, and you see it in advertising everywhere. They're telling people, look forward to this awareness that you're going to arrive at if you buy our product. They don't say, you don't need to buy our product. It already got sold, already sold out, already used and ran its course. You know, that's what Ion's saying. We've already ran our course. We already did what we were going to do before we showed up. That doesn't encourage any sales.
And McLuhan said the new Pharisees and scribes are the scientists, and the non-physical comes and tells us all these things that shakes all the constructions we have to, all the theories we have to explain the book of nature and the book of Revelation. And this is the 12th calendar that we're engaging in.
Right. Now, that you just said the scientist is an agent of the Antichrist. That's exactly what McLuhan, Zappa does. His plays are always about a renegade rogue scientist who has a new form of hypnosis, a new form of techno-gadget. That's the same theme as McLuhan's. McLuhan's exposing the Prince of the Air as an electric engineer.
Yes, he's exposing the thunders as... the crazy scientist that wants to conquer the world and destroy humanity and make us monsters or robots or...
Right. Dupes. Now what you just... Okay, so you got the... And so you have Zappa and them exposing the scientists all the time acting like surface clowns. you look at the cover, you look in the Newsweek article of McLuhan in 1966, a big spread on this great genius, they're saying, and he's got pictures there. He allowed these to be posted of him making balloon faces, childish faces. I mean, your father or anybody's parent, when they got in the media, they did not make fucking clown faces. McLuhan was so detached, they didn't care that he looked stupid. And the Zappa does the same thing with the ridiculous pictures of him. There's a great detachment of being a buffoon in the middle of it all. And that's what McLuhan called the emperor cum clown. You have to be emperor and clown to contend with the tetratic flips that are going to be done to you if the Android meme starts hoiking you up.
They both had a great sense of humor, and they used it to the benefit. A great sense of humor. I mean, that's the thing.
Well, how about this?
Zappa
they didn't have a great sense of humor, Bert. They understood how the Android meme was going to frame you. That's part of the challenge collapse. Okay. You are going to be nailed at some point in some way. And so it happened to Frank real quickly. They had a guy photograph him on the toilet, and that became a poster all over the world. How would you like to have yourself sitting on a crapper, and that's a poster everywhere you go?
Yes,
and they used to make fun of him. What?
It's amazing how, in a way, also McLuhan and Zappa said the solution is the apocalypse, and Ian Constant said yes. We have to erase this recording. We have to erase all these thunders and start.
Let's try and relate the thunders here. So McLuhan defined thunders as technological environments. And Ion has different meanings of thunders. Some of it we're not allowed to talk about. You have to take buy the recordings, and then hopefully it's discussed in one of the rewrites or something. But the thunders were really special in the Bible. But in general, you could say they are the technological effects. All right? So that's a lie from me, but maybe not so much of a lie. I don't know how much of a lie it is. But you're not wrong to include the Joycean McLuhan definition of thunder as the same as the Bible's use of it. Okay? You're not too far off. Okay, so how do we bring in the thunders in Zappa? Where is Zappa got thunder happening?
Well, he's aware of all the different technologies affecting the environment, and he recognized them even as art forms.
Right. I'm trying to figure out
from the radio, the TV, the movies, the comics, the magazines, the advertisement.
Right.
Could it be his work with the synclav?
Synclavier, yes. He definitely has thunderous. He says he likes to move air molecules around huge stadiums. So he loves to create huge effects and sound in the new arenas. Now, I'm reading a history of rock, and a lot of the bands in the early 70s went into what was called arena rock, and then punk rebelled against that. The next generation didn't like these big, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Genesis, whatever other guys did this big rock stuff, rock arena. The next generation said, that's too big and impersonal. We're going to bring back the Ramones and garage bands of the mid-'60s and go back to little short singles. So Zappa could be lumped in as a guy duped into doing arena rock. But again, he tried to show that he was very conscious of the process and was trying to sculpt the arena rock environment. So he said, I get great pleasure out of moving huge volumes of air molecules around in the big environments, the big arenas. So that is working with thunder. That's Orpheus tuning the world. I mean, the amplified music, which he helped invent some of these amplifiers, that's thunderous activity. So, like, Zappa acted it out. He didn't explain it completely as technically as McLuhan did. Zappa acted out what McLuhan was. Zappa was the example of what McLuhan was saying the modern artist, scientist, doctor would be.
Well, they were not only creating, but very interested on the effects of their outering, as you say, in creating.
Right. Yeah, Zappa always
affecting
said
the air molecules and the chemistry.
He was saying, yeah, he knew that. He would say there were invisible frequencies going on, and Uncle Meat was exploiting them. Uncle Meat being the metaphor for the triggermen. That'd be McLuhan's term for Henry Kissinger and the tetrad managers and the intelligence agencies and the advertisers. So he said, we got these inaudible frequencies happening. We must make them audible. We must hear them to see what's going on. And so he always said, I'm just making these new songs and new orchestras and new performances to find out what they sound like. So he's not like a Beethoven who knows what it's going to sound like, I guess, and then writes it up to sound like what he wants the sound to be. Frank admits that we don't know what this group dynamic, this synergy of the whole rock experience and other media he used, we don't know what the total output of it is. We have to do it. So that's probing the thunder.
Yes, and in a way, they're commenting on exploring the effects, like wondering, what is this? We are senders and receivers, and we're everywhere and nowhere at the same time with the electric environment for no reason at all. So McLuhan, in a way, had this need to become a Catholic to explain the thingness that he could not explain. And Zappa was also into trying to understand the cosmic debris, but this beyond was not possible until Ian himself or themselves came and explained what is really happening and what are things really, how things are really made, and what were
the thunders about?
Yeah.
So the artist often cops out and says, well, I'm an artist, I paint because I can't explain it, or I write because I can't explain it. They always say, my art speaks for what I'm trying to point out. If I could point it out, then there wouldn't be any art. I wouldn't make any art. So they came really close, Zappa and McLuhan, at describing Ion, but they couldn't do Ion. They couldn't be it. And then Ion comes forth to do it, but they became very close and couldn't spell it out, though McLuhan seemed to be more accurate because Zappa rejected the Bible, but McLuhan knew the Bible had something in it, and therefore he was trying to figure out what it was, and he was right about that. The Bible had something that humans didn't know about.
Yes, and both were aware that each thunder changes the pace, the rhythm.
Right. You know what he called, maybe his term for thunder was harmonic climate. He used to use that term a lot, the harmonic climate.
That was McLuhan?
No, that was Zappa.
You say Zappa, yeah.
Yeah, he would talk about creating harmonic climates or taking the harmonic climate that was and creating an environment, sculpting it, changing it. You see it in that Stairway to Heaven, the way he has the synclavier kind of burp every now and then, humorously make a weird sound in the middle of this great music, or, great classic rock song. You've noticed that, Roxy, right?
Yes.
He'll make the synclavier do these cosmic burps and things. Which is pretty good. Let's see.
The synclavier was farting all the time to
right.
harmonic.
Now here's what you do. you go to Toastmaster Replica, which Zappa produced, and you read the song lyrics or the song titles, it's really symptomatic of what he and Beefheart were about and what they were talking about. So one of the song title is Old Fart at Play. Another one is Ant-Man B, Antmanbee. There's the history of media. Ant, man, and bee. Man's in the interval. Art, the ant makes hardware, the bee makes software. And there's a whole bunch of other neat titles that Beefheart is saying that, to me, seem to be Zappa's theology that he didn't say. He let Don say it. You know what I mean? The other part. The other unsaid part in Zappa's world.
Yeah.
Yes, and he always spoke about the electric light, and he was somehow fascinated with the fact that the light is the only medium that has no content.
That's McLuhan. And Zappa was always holding up. Zappa had pictures of himself holding up a telephone without it plugged in, a light bulb, holding up electric gadgets. And he once did an ad, a commercial for Pacific Gas and Electric. I think that's the California hydro environment, the big setup there. And in the ad, he advocated media ecology. He says people should turn off their electric use every now and then. He actually took a media ecological line in his public service announcement on behalf of the gas electric company, Pacific Gas and Electric. So he even sounded like McLuhan there. And that just happened out of the blue. Jerry Fialka heard it and played it for me. He recorded it around 1990, 91. All of a sudden, the government asked Zappa to do it.
Yes, but how can you turn off your other bodies? That's not possible anymore.
He was saying that right in 1990 when it was no longer possible and Frank was obsolescent and was going to be kicked out, killed, murdered pretty soon, and that's when Bob's album came out to pick up the task. I became the next rapid series of innovations to provide a airsats and environment until Ion showed up. But it was airsats until Ion, then it became bona fide. But another point, I think in his essay for Life magazine in 1968, one of the sections is called the Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Like in his article, he's pointing out the electrical structure. I've got to check that. But that may be why they invited him to do it, because he mentioned them in an article back in 1968. I wonder, unfortunately, I think Gail has most of those articles are deleted. Anything that Zappa wrote, interviews are okay because they're the magazine's property. But anything that Frank particularly wrote, I'm going to have to get the actual artifact. I want to read the storyline to Uncle Meat that came with the albums. I want to read that Life magazine article. Let's just see if that does come up. Maybe... Well, it was a Life magazine article. Can't be, here's Ion. What's Ion saying? Well, Ion sent me an email. So 5:45, 2 hours ago. He says, or they say, mighty fine shoe, S-H-O-E, ... really big, ... really big shoe, S-H-O-E. Now a shoe is Stinkfoot. That's a song by Zappa called Stinkfoot. And then he says, may they, here's Ion, sick of us talking about these guys, but he's right in tune with my chart. I obsolesce them all. He goes, may they rest in, so it says, really great show. He does the obligatory polite compliment, and then he goes manipulating. He says, may they rest in peace until we get there. Capital
yes.
W.
Yes, we're just moving the air molecules until we come back.
We're just phatically. Oh, listen. So he's demanded a song. Portal, Still Alive. That's that game show thing, right? And so I don't know what's going on. He says this is excellent, and excellent is spelled. in capital letters, E-X-E-C-L-E-N-T, execlent. He was so worked up about getting it played, he spelled the word wrong. Execlent. And there's George. What is George's last name, Carol? Up in Toronto? Greg's friend. George, the ever cynic of Iondom, sort of. George was Lanto, Lapperday. Oh, Carolyn doesn't hear me. She's watching TV. Hard to get her involved in this. She was listening up till a few minutes ago. George, what's George's name up in Toronto? George Lepardo. George Lepardo. George Renault. Renault, that's it. Hey, can I have a bite? I'm eating in Deborah Morse's ear. She had complained about me eating my breakfast, dinner, and lunch during whatever we are, Payday.
Well, the show lasts 18 hours, and I don't know how many, so you have to.
Yes, I do not eat a good chunk of the hours. I do not eat. So 13 minutes after Ion sent in their messages, George Renault, on behalf of the Evergreen, sent in his latest mental doodle. He calls them George's mental doodles. So they always show up Saturday night. I used to immediately respond and tell him to listen to us, but I gave up. He never did anything about it. I don't even know if he saw my responses. So we're talking about the Thunders. What was Life magazine. Let's see if we can find a Life magazine article in 1968. Okay, Zappa. You have to find good Zappa articles. So I'm looking.
In a way, both McLuhan and Zappa were trying to rebalance the perception because each media was focusing on one sense, and in a way they were trying to bring all the senses back together and work together. They still do it, but in a more balanced way. And because the next environment is the tactile synesthetic environment of
Okay, now this is true. McLuhan was trying to recover the eye, retrieving Western fundamentalism of the visual space, bring it back comprehensively, use it without being a dupe of it. And Zappa was always saying, we're here to make you rational again. It's the same agenda, to retrieve Western archetypes. But you don't do it by knee-jerk being a neoconservative, just trying to impose visual space on people, ramming up their asses without awareness of the service and disservices. Frank and McLuhan and Joyce were aware of the service and disservices while pointing out the value of that tradition. What Frank called it excellence. As he went on about excellence. People didn't experience excellence anymore. And, the more you become...
Excellence, like Ion wrote it.
Yes. Excellent. Good point. Yeah, execlent. Now that's really that's a way to. You don't want to be an old-fashioned academic saying, "Oh, we need excellence," so you misspell it. That's right. That's exactly the answer. You say we're all for execlence. You say it's wrong. Okay, so what were we just talking about? Excellence, something.
You wanted to read something?
The Life magazine article.
So there it is. It's listed, and it isn't the content of the. It's not working there. Let's see. Maybe under articles. 68. The Oracle has it also. Wow, we have it. We have the article. We have the gold. And I'll just start reading and we'll see. What'd you say?
Excellent.
Excellent. Now,
No, I did other work.
You did what?
Excellent. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. A Mexican breakdown. We're failing to match here. What are you saying? Now, here's what Ion, making fun of Andrew Crystal, is excellent. He made fun of the New Zealand accent. Excellent, the way Ion would say it. And, somebody sent me a picture of a maniacal guy laughing and said, Mr. Crystal. Was he talking about Andrew Crystal? I don't know. We'll have to look into that guy later. So, in Eric's book, in the history of Menippean satire, he talks about the role of digression in Menippean satire. And just scanning down through the article, there's a section Zappa titles, "Oh, those great rhythms, digression 2. So that means there might have been a digression 1. Yes, the big note, digression 1. He's actually naming and using the word digression, which is a major theme of Menippean satire. Then he has digression 3. So he's saying that I could write this article in 3 paragraphs, but I'm going to provide digressions and fill up many pages. So, in light of McLuhan, who everybody called the Electric Oracle, the Oracle of the Electric Age, was the title. Now, now, I don't know if I've ever spelled this out before. McLuhan does, they do a big spread on him in Life magazine in 1966, and it's called the Oracle of the Electric Age. So 2 years later, Zappa does a big article for Life magazine, and what's he call it? The Oracle has it all psyched out. I was the only person in the world that summer who looked at it and said, Jesus, Frank's talking about McLuhan. Because I'm the only one who fucking remembered that there was an article 2 years before on McLuhan calling him the Oracle. Right? So I'm thinking, is Frank talking about McLuhan when he says the Oracle has it all psyched out? He had known that McLuhan was called the Oracle two years before? No, he didn't. But the words do it. 40 years later, what is this, 47 years later, we are proving.
Knew it.
Yes. 47 years later, we are pointing out that he was referring to McLuhan and didn't know it. But the words were. I mean, how you have this twinning of themselves going on for a couple of years, for a year or so before this article, and we're spelling it out. Nobody knew this. Now we're making it visible. And then you can go back and find that Zappa gets one big article in Life magazine when he's at the peak of his media acceptability, and he gets to use the word that was referred to McLuhan. I mean, so beautiful, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's predicting Ion. Ion is oracular. Yeah, everything was. Well, that's too general. Let's try to make it particular. This thing was predicting Ion. The Oracle has it all psyched up.
From the Genesis back to the tree of life, as Ion says, everything has been these thunders appearing to retrieve the power. So it's really the conceptual continuity.
Yes.
In big scale.
Now, here's what Frank might have, in his own personal perception, chemical body perception, who do you think he was referring to? He was referring to me. Because I'm there telling him stuff back then that he's finding useful and he's smart enough to appreciate, but he probably, like my grandkids, who the fuck is this guy? How does he know all this stuff? You know what I mean? He probably was impressed. So he made a joking remark. Bob has it all psyched out is what the title means, because he would have heard semi-McLuhan things from me. Send me this, send me that, and he would have noticed it. Okay, so let's read it. So this is June 28th.
I just want to interrupt very shortly, because Science said, for example, you were mentioned by Joyce and Nostradamus and
the Bible,
Zappa.
and Moses.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes, it's like McLuhan is trying to understand the logos because he wants to. He always claims he wants to understand the technological environment and its effects, but he was actually trying to understand the connection of the logos to to the thingness and how we create. And yes, I think in the words these things show, because this is the link to the non-physical. For me, it's like very logical.
Right. Now, what time do you have to go? It's 7 o'clock your time. Have you got 2 hours or 3 hours left?
$8:40.
You only got a half hour left? No, you have an hour and a half left, right? Hour and a half.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. So, now what's interesting about this article is Frank lays it out like an inventory of effects. It's semi-journalistic, but he's really got it organized, and he's reviewing the history of pop music, rock and roll, from the 50s till maybe 14 years of music. So it's June 28th, that's 2 times 14. It's 1968, 6 and 8 is 14. So in the history of rock and roll, they usually sort of begin in 54, which is right after that dramatic year, 1953, when many things changed. And you can read in my diaries. Bert would remember how my father and I discussed the changes of 1953. Stalin died. Many things happened in that year. So one of the effects of it was the surfacing of Bill Haley and the Comets in 1954. So Life magazine, June 28th, 1968. So the title is, first section is called The New Rock. Now, I'm going to mute you. You're moving papers around, right? Roxy? Right? You're making
now
noises?
I'm muted. No.
Oh, okay, good. All right, so then, Bert, you were muted for a second there, right? You got dropped. No, that's not you.
No, I'm not muted.
Okay, so you guys are available. All right. So here we go. The first section is called The New Rock. Rock music, oh my God, look at this. The first sentence. Now, I haven't read this maybe in 40 years. I might have read it once in the 70s after reading in 68, so it's going to be all new to me. Look at this. Rock music is a necessary element of contemporary society. That's a fucking doctor talking. There's your healing. You're right. There's your healing. You know what I mean? He's not. What would John Lennon have said? He would not have said that. He begins.
But Zappa claimed that many times, that he was healing
household pneumonia
music.
Yeah, he was therapeutic. So he goes, rock music is a necessary element of contemporary society. It is functional. It is healthy and valid artistically. It is also educational. In the background, in the brackets, how to ask a girl for a date, what love is like, close bracket. It has all the answers to what your mother and father won't tell you. So rock is the oracle. He's saying the Android meme is the oracle. The oracle has it all psyched out. That's what he's saying. It's a teaching machine. This is like high school version of McLuhan. You know what I mean? He's talking to high school people and explaining exactly how McLuhan, he's talking technically like McLuhan. It has all the answers to what your mother and father won't tell you. It is also a big business. This is a brief history of rock and its relationship to our society. What's fucking more McLuhan-esque than that? I mean, McLuhan does it differently, a little more sophisticated and academic, but this is the same point. He's going to explain the medium of rock. This is incredible. Rock music is a necessary element of contemporary society. It is functional. It is... Now, wait a minute. You guys are claiming you're fucking muted? What's that noise? Look, I'm going to mute.
Say something.
All right, no, let me mute. No, I want your reaction, so it's sort of hard. Just try not to move things so that it's very loud for a minute. Are you shifting your papers around, your notes, your lecture notes?
No.
Your PhD?
I did it, but...
Okay, here we go.
No, but as McLean said, the electric environment is creating this effect of people retrieving religion and the mythic.
Right.
And,
so Frank is...
Zappa says the religion you have to follow because it's the only one that delivers the good is music, is frequency.
Right. That's right.
Similar to what Ion then says too.
No, that's a good point. The oracle is a religious term, and he's calling rock religious. That's a good point. And you're going to see, I remember he's going to go into that, but I'd forgotten he started off this way. Rock music is a necessary element of contemporary society. It is functional. It is healthy and valid artistically. And this is when people are hating rock. They think it's the dangerous hippies and everything else. They banned rock and roll. I mean, it's causing all kinds of problems for 14 years. Rock and roll and then rock. It is healthy and valid artistically. Who the hell? Anybody in the art environment other than Andy Warhol would agree with that? I don't think so. It is also educational. How to ask a girl for a date, what love is like. It has all the answers to what your mother and father won't tell you. It is also a big business. This is a brief history of rock and its relationship to our society. So he's going to do a figure ground analysis. Then he starts off low, like, gesturing the wand. Isn't that what you go when you make the wand gesture when you're a wizard? Low. Okay? So he goes low. Then he has fifth, PFF, PFF. So it starts off with a sound effect, low, and then he says, a nifty questionnaire to get you interested, so you'll read the rest of the article. So he actually wants you to read the whole article. I mean, this is a serious course he's offering. He goes, part 1, the 50s. So here's where he's going to do an inventory of media of the 50s. Who remembers beer? White port and lemon juice. For 10 points, what was the name of the guy in your school who used to buy your juice for parties? 2, who remembers making out and getting hot? For 10 points, how old were you when it happened? 3, who remembers ducktails, peggers, leather jackets, bunny shoes, brogans, tight sweaters, teardrops, full skirts with a million starchy petticoats, Sir Guy shirts and khakis? For 10 points, how much did you pay for your St. Christopher medallion? 4, now this is the 50s he's doing. Who remembers gang fights, tire chains, boys with razor blades in the toes of their wedgies, girls with razor blades in their hair, blood and sickening crunch? For 10 points, tell why the cops were afraid of your gang. How come you guys aren't laughing? Did you mute yourselves?
Yes.
Yes.
No, keep you're quiet. Yeah, unmute yourself if you can be quiet, so we can hear your spontaneous responses. So, anyways, that's pretty good. And he's saying who remembers. I think he's implying nobody would remember it unless prompted. Or maybe they would remember because there is no past in Electric Age. It's always being recycled anyways in news stories. So he lists all those things. And he goes, part 2, the 60s. Okay, now here's what's funny. He's going to list things that are happening right now as if they're obsolete already. All right? Who remembers speed, smoke, acid, transcendental meditation? That was all happening in 1968, and he's already pronouncing it gone. For 10 points, name your connection or guru. There's the drug dealer is the hidden ground of music, or your guru. So that's pretty clever. I mean, he says in the Bob Marshall interview that things happen so fast that your most recent 5 or 10 minutes might become nostalgia for you. I don't know if you remember that in the Bob Marshall interview. He talks about the world will end in nostalgia because you'll become nostalgic for something that happened 3 hours before, and you'll just grind to a standstill. So he's implying things are becoming past pretty quickly, and that's McLuhan-esque. Who remembers getting stoned and having an orgy? For 10 points, how old were you when you learned you were incapable of relating to others in a tender, personal way and finally discovered you were becoming asexual? So there's an inventory of discarded effects. Who remembers electric hair, bell-bottoms, plastic jackets, sandals, high boots, bulky knit sweaters, Gucci's, miniskirts, DeVoe shirts, and velvet pants? For 10 points, look around the house, find your beads and bells, and recite Hare Krishna without laughing. Now this, he's in people's faces. What is big in 68, he's asking you to consider the past. Now that's pretty McLuhan-esque. It's bonanza. He said you guys are celebrating all these fads you guys are into right now is bonanza replays, right?
Yes, he's telling them everybody's doing that, they're already obsolete.
Right. It never happened. All these things you thought you were doing 2 weeks ago are not part of your present. Okay, so then he says, who remembers demonstrations, truncheons, mace, police dogs, the Pentagon, Century City's in L.A., blood and sickening crunch. He had that on the 50s. Blood and sickening crunch. That was back in the 50s, so it's still there. For 10 points, tell why you were afraid to cut your hair, infiltrate the establishment, and do it the easy way. That's what he does. He starts criticizing these kids in 1969. Then a year later, he's over in London talking at the London School of Economics to the young radicals, the Marxist SDS kind of things. And he's saying, what you need to do is cut your hair and infiltrate the military. That's what he's telling kids to do, if you're serious. So he's saying it right here. Why were you afraid to cut your hair, infiltrate the establishment, and do it the easy way? I don't know what he means by easy way. Cut your hair, is that the easy way? Well, maybe it is the easy way if you infiltrate it. The hard way is to make a big issue out of it, and then the Android me makes a fad out of it, and then makes money out of your rebellion. Maybe that's what he means. That's the hard way. So he says, so he did 8 questions, 4 for the 50s and 4 for the 60s. Our present state of socio-sexual enlightenment is, to a certain extent, attributable to the evolution of rock and vice versa. So the sexual revolution is due to rock. There's a figure ground thing. And rock evolved because of the sexual enlightenment. So it's intertwined, tactile, right? Our story begins back in the good old days. It is the recreation centers. No Levi's or Capris, please. And he has in brackets, school functions, unquote. Not in brackets, in quotes. School functions and teen hops were real swell and keen and acceptable to mum and dada. He pronounces dad, D-A-D-A, dada. Now, he says that in his autobiography that he never heard of dada until it was pointed out to him that he was doing dada, and he accepted it once the definition was laid to him. But when did they tell him this? In 67, 65, 66, pretty early? If that's not a misprint, he's saying dada right there, even though he's not supposed to know about dada. I guess somebody pointed out the first day he performed. He said they were also dull. These school function and teen hops were acceptable. They were also dull unless you liked to dance a foxtrot. I don't know why I'm mispronouncing words. They were also dull unless you liked to dance a foxtrot as the high school swing band fumbled through an evening of combo orcs and reprocessed Glenn Miller. So in 1954, 55, 56, he still had high school parties around jazz and swing. The kids would be holding on to each other desperately and sweating. The chaperone would come along and say, quote, 7 inches apart, please, and hold a sawed-off ruler between you and the girl. They had to actually dance 7 inches apart. He says society was very repressed sexually, and dancing was a desperate attempt to get a little physical contact with the opposite sex. Free love, groupies, the plaster casters of Chicago, they used to make plaster models of rock stars' penises. The plaster casters of Chicago and such bizarre variants as the GTOs of Laurel Canyon in L.A. didn't exist then. Preoccupation with sexual matters accounted for a disproportionate amount of daily conscious thought process and diverted a lot of energy from schoolwork. So here's Frank, the teacher, saying, if we just let these kids fuck more, they'll do better in their fucking schoolwork. Trying to be rational. So I put him and McLuhan in the sex quadrant on the chart. McLuhan analyzed the sexual changes and transformations, but he did it a little more technically. Zappa is an advocate. He's taking a point of view. He's saying, this is where he's not a pure media ecologist, to say that people were repressed in the 50s sexually. No, they had different sensory ratios, different from the sensory ratios in the 60s. So, look at the Chinese. There's this documentary out now they didn't have sex for 20 years in Mao's People Cultural Revolution. Like they're talking these young Chinese girls and how their parents and grandparents didn't know what sex was pretty well. That's a Chinese sensory ratio. Doesn't mean they're Puritans or repressed. It means they're a different kind of sensory requirements. So anyways, it's like McLuhan said, sex to a tribal person is like a cup of coffee. Preoccupation, well, we did that. This sexual, because the kids were too obsessed with sex, he claims. Now, they didn't become obsessed with sex really consciously until the 60s. But they were becoming asexual because they were becoming discarnate. The TV landscape was making their sexual energies distorted. So they wouldn't mind where they had sex because they were concentrating on their image in the TV landscape. This is before the TV body. So he goes, this sexual problem, this and the low quality of teaching in many kids. What? He left out a word. So there may be mistakes in this. This and the low quality of teaching cause many kids to seek education in the streets. Youth gangs with marvelous names and frightening reputation cruise the streets at night, searching for ways to compensate for the lack of sexually approachable girls. Vandalism and assorted manglings became acceptable substitutes for teen sex. Young men would compete like cowboy gunfighters to be the baddest cat in quotes. This dubious honor would generally entitle its bearer to boss the gang, and in some instances, preferential treatment from those few daring girls who would, quote, go all the way, unquote. So Zappa may be consciously hoiking up the sex meme to bug the bourgeoisie that are reading this magazine. He might not even believe in it.
McLuhan also said violence was an effect of the electric environment. Because right. We were losing our identity and it made us violent.
Whereas Frank is saying it's a chemical body and its frustrations cause violence.
Yes, but McLuhan said we're just we're seeking for roles because of this loss of identity. And one of the roles is the gangster.
Right. So Zappa is describing the symptoms. You make an inventory of the symptoms. He's not looking at the figure ground causes. He's doing, as an American, he's doing efficient causality. He's not doing formal causality. But in the long run, when you see what he wrote that he wasn't conscious of, but his words were, he is doing formal causality, but he wouldn't know those terms. So he says, parents, unfortunately, have a tendency to misunderstand
Did he cut out?
Oh, I thought I was the one dropping.
Okay.
No, he cut out.
Carol knocked me out. But I'm back on. Yeah, I'm back on. So what was being... Did you guys know we got knocked off? Did I get knocked off?
Yes.
Very sure.
How'd you know?
Yes. You just clicked out. You started to say a word, and then you clicked out.
Right. And could you hear me talking to Carolyn because her phone was still on?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because she dropped her phone and somehow affected my phone. Okay. Now, what's interesting, here's Zappa, who looks like a maniac in the pop culture in 1968. He just attended the Grammys and grossed out a lot of people at the Grammys earlier that year. And so here he is talking down to the parents. He's explaining like Dr. Spock or Ruth, the sex therapist woman, Ruth. He's being a Henry Kissinger, talking, explaining society to the adults, and the adults would consider him a disgusting, dirty hippie or something. See the irony here? He's explaining parents to the parents, and most of them wouldn't even know who he was. They'd be reading this and they wouldn't know who Zappa was. But for those that did know him, encountered him, unfortunately, from their point of view, they would find this quite arrogant. Parents, unfortunately, have a tendency to misunderstand, misinterpret, and worst of all, ridicule patterns of behavior which seem foreign to them. When they noticed a growing interest among teenagers in matters pertaining to the pleasure-giving functions of the body, they felt threatened. Mom and Dad were sexually uninformed and inhibited. In brackets, a lot of things wrong with society today are directly attributable to the fact that the people who make the laws are sexually maladjusted. End of bracket. Mom and Dad were sexually uninformed and inhibited, and they saw no reason why their kids should be raised differently. In brackets, why should all these dirty teenagers have all the fun? End of bracket. Sex is for making babies, and it makes your body grow misshapen and ugly afterward. And let's not talk about it, shall we? So, he does this mundane therapist, sociologist, detached expert, tetrad manager, talking to the Americans. Then he goes, the big note, digression 1. Okay, so which is satirical. I mean, he's talking to these kids about practicing, the parents were practicing about, now he's going to fucking talk about something else. A digression. Why does he need
it's like
this
us.
digression?
We are talking about Zappa and we talk about the non-physical. He does the same. He's talking about the non-physical.
Yeah,
big
good point.
Frequency, big note.
Right. Non-physical is physical. And when we're saying non-physical, it's a more subtle version of the physical. So it is physical. So he goes, the big note, digression 1. In the Abnukiel's Imuka Electric Symphony Orchestra album, so that's the name of the album that he hires to make Lumpy Gravy, with some of the Wrecking Crew in it, the famous Wrecking Crew. So he calls it the Abnukiel's Imuka Electric Symphony Orchestra. It sounds like a vomit, a barf sound. The Abnukiel's Imuka Electric Symphony Orchestra album, Lumpy Gravy. So in that album, there is a section on side 2. So he's turning this into an ad for his own work. Hey, this is what McLuhan would do. He's turning the article into an advertisement for his own important works. In this album, there is a section on side 2 where several unidentified characters discuss the origins of the universe. One of the characters explains the concept of the big note. This is like Ion. You go right for the big topics. You go right to the, you people are fucked. You better go back to source energy. You better get happy or get out. Frank has gone to the big level. This is part of Manipian satire. He starts bringing up the origins of the universe. One of the characters explains the concept of the big note, : everything in the universe is composed basically of vibrations. Hyphen, light is a vibration, sound is a vibration, atoms are composed of vibrations. Hyphen, and all these vibrations just might be harmonics of some incomprehensible fundamental cosmic tone. That's Ion, right? The non-physical, the mystery landscape. The harmonics, now that's environmental, harmonic climate. Harmonics of the thunders of some incomprehensible fundamental cosmic tone. Then he says, how important is sound? I participated in a conversation recently. Now, this is what McLuhan would do. He'd cite a fucking conversation he had with somebody on the street. You know, like, okay, here's the important evidence. I was talking to Billy the other day. I participated in a conversation recently with Herbie Cohen, in brackets, our manager, about rumors of a government research project. The project, it seems, has been going on for several years. What does sound do to plants? Now, this is the soundtrack, the story in Uncle Meat. He's already talking about it. And Uncle Meat has just come out about this time. No, it doesn't come in 69. Lumpy Gravy and We're Only for Money sort of come out in the summer of 68, approximately. But he's not talking about the Uncle Meat scenario, which will come out in early 69. But he is saying it here. What does sound do to plants? According to Herbie, a field of corn increased its yield, the individual ears even got bigger, because the research team set up loudspeakers in the field and pumped in some music. According to Herbie, the next step is to find out what kind of music the vegetables like the best. Then Zappa says, the ways in which sound affects the human organism are myriad and subtle. Now, he's talking about this research on the effects of sound on people and plants in the history of rock. So he's starting, if you're smart, he's going to explain that rock is a government operation. right? Or something like that could come up here. The ways in which sound affects the human organism are myriad and subtle. Why does the sound of Eric Clapton's guitar give one girl a sensation which she describes as bone conduction? That's in quotes, bone conduction. Would she still experience bone conduction if Eric, using the same extremely loud, thick tone, played nothing but Hawaiian music? A little nod to Bob there. Which is more important? The timbre, in brackets color texture of a sound, the succession of intervals which make up the melody, the harmonic support, in brackets chords, which tells your ear what the melody means, in brackets, is it major or minor or neutral or what, the volume at which the sound is heard, the volume at which the sound is produced, the distance from source to ear, the density of the sound, the number of sounds per section, the number of sounds per second or fraction thereof, ... and so on. So there's a long question analyzing all these aspects of sound as an environment. Just like McLuhan would ask this kind of stuff. Which of these would be the most important element in an audio experience which gave you a pleasurable sensation? An erotic sensation. Look at the kids in school tapping their feet, beating with their fingers. Now that would be tactility. People try unconsciously to get in tune with their environment. In a variety of ways, even the most unconcerned, that's in quotes, even the most unconcerned people make attempts to tune up with their God. So there he's bringing in the religious part, tune up in quotes. Hal Zeiger, in brackets, or maybe it's Hal Zeiger, in brackets, one of the first big promoters of rock entertainment during the 50s, close bracket, says, quote, I knew that there was a big thing here that was basic, that was big, that had to get bigger. I realized that this music got through to the youngsters because the big beat matched the great rhythm of the human body. I understood that. I knew it, and I knew there was nothing that anyone could do to know that out of them. And I knew there was nothing that anyone could do to know that out of them. Not sure what that means. I mean, maybe to get rid of it? I don't know. And I further knew that they would carry this with them the rest of their lives. So here's the government scientists saying this music is going to program people incredibly. So Zappa is talking about programming the environment, specializing in sound. Right? That's McLuhan.
Yes.
What do you think of this?
McLuhan also said that rock music...
It's not really a digression. He's dealing with the topic, but it would appear to be a digression. So what were you saying?
No, it's that McLuhan considered rock was going to undo literacy. I remember hearing it in one of the speeches that he said rock music was going to bring back the oral tradition. So Frank is sort of giving...
He said it already did. Bert, he said it already did kill education, literate education. So then what'd you say? I drowned out your last sentence.
And then that's sort of what I'm getting from reading what you're reading. Frank is laying it out as well.
Yeah. He's talking about the huge changes between the 50s and the 60s because the sound has changed. The technology has changed. I mean, if someone wanted to be a McLuhanite, but not just blatantly quoting McLuhan, but wanted to make it sort of different in case people were bored of hearing McLuhan, he's doing the perfect representation of McLuhan without mentioning McLuhan, without mentioning the word media. I mean, he's totally a disciple of McLuhan here in his motives, too. So that's the big note, digression one. Then it says Rock Around the Clock, which is the famous movie, came out in 55, Blackboard Jungle. And Rock Around the Clock was Bill Haley's song, came out in 54. That was like one of the first rock and roll songs. There's a debate about what is the actual first, but it makes the short list. So this section is called Rock Around the Clock, the title of Bill Haley's song. So Zappa says, now, he's going to go personal here. He's going to give personal experience. In my days of flaming youth, I was extremely suspect of any rock music played by white people. The sincerity and emotional intensity of their performances when they sang about boyfriends and girlfriends and breaking up, etc., was nowhere when I compared it to my high school Negro R&B heroes like Johnny Otis, Howlin' Wolf, and Willie Mae Thornton. So he'd been made tactile, gritty and tactile by listening to rhythm and blues, and the white, almost jazz-like smooth surfaces of white rock music, just wasn't tactile enough for him. So he says, but then I remember going to see Blackboard Jungle. When the titles flash, okay, so he's going to another medium. When the titles flash up there on the screen, Bill Haley and his comments started blurching, quote, 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock, unquote. It was the loudest sound kids had ever heard. There's the thunder. Good point, Roxy. There's your thunder. It was the loudest sound kids had ever heard at that time. I remember being inspired with awe. In cruddy little teenage rooms across America, kids had been huddling around old radios and cheap record players listening to the, quote, dirty music, unquote, of their lifestyle. In brackets, the parent says, go in your room if you want to listen to that crap, and turn the volume all the way down, unquote. So nobody could hear the radio rock and roll really loud, he's saying. For most of them, they're in their little teenage rooms, huddling around old radios and cheap record players. But in the theater, watching Blackboard Jungle, they couldn't tell you to turn it down. I didn't care if Bill Haley was white or sincere. He was playing the Teenage National Anthem. That's capitalized, Teenage National Anthem. And it was so loud, I was jumping up and down. Now, there's the moving the sound molecules around. He's actually being conceptually consistent here. He goes on for the next 30 years, 25 years, making it louder and louder in many different ways, not just volume loud, making it more and more invisible and digital. So he says, Blackboard Jungle, not even considering the storyline, in brackets, which had the old people winning in the end, end of bracket, not even considering the storyline, represented a strange sort of endorsement of the teenage cause. Endorsement in quotes. In quotes, they have made a movie about us, therefore we exist. But see, that's McLuhan's point. You translate one medium into another medium, it has drastic effects. So for kids, at least in the content, seeing themselves in another medium, that was unbelievable. But of course, there were other more technical sensory effects going on that McLuhan would outline. So Zappa is doing the efficient causality, looking at the content, referencing a bit of the form, but it's the efficient part of the form, the efficient causality, the loudness. So are you guys there?
Yes.
Yep. Let's see. Roxy get knocked off? Yes. You got knocked off, Roxy, right? So you have any comment?
Yes, I wanted to comment, since you were talking about the big note, how, in a way, he's doing his version of the Genesis.
Right.
That at the beginning was the frequency. Yeah. Zappa says at the beginning is the big note.
Right. What did he say? He said, yes. He's talking about on Lumpy Gravy as one of the characters discussing the origins of the universe. That's on. We could play that. That's part of Lumpy Gravy. That came out, made in early '67, comes out in '68, and they're talking in the piano. So he's got, Motorhead or somebody doing this put on how it started. So yeah, there's your
and like he recognizes the big note as the first thunder.
Right, and it agrees with Ion that the frequencies and sounds are beneath the atoms. They're prior to the atoms.
Yes.
Yes, but when in the Genesis recording, you say it at the beginning, something like that, like George.
Yeah, beginning.
Beginning.
Yeah, that's a quote from Phineas Wake. The beginning.
And I understand with all these things that are shaking or off the foundations of what we think we knew, there was no beginning, and human creatures were always there, and the words were also always there.
Yeah, there was no beginning.
So that's only the.
But Joyce is saying he knows there's no beginning. Yeah, Joyce knows there's no beginning, so he misspells it. The bug inning. The bug. For the little people, the little bugs, they think there's a beginning. So what is it? I think, therefore I exist. What did Descartes say? I think, therefore I exist.
Therefore I am.
Zappa's.
I think, therefore I am.
Oh, therefore I am. Mm-hmm. So Zappa is taking a collective medium. It's a they. They have made a movie about us, therefore we exist. That's good media. And he understands that if you're not in the media, you don't exist. He said that in the 80s, but he understands this in the 60s in very simple, rudimentary ways. He says, he laid out the effect of Blackboard Jungle, and he goes, responding like dogs, some of the kids began to go for the throat. They just say, oh, my God, we've been reckoning. Now we can kill everybody over 20 years old. Open rebellion, he says. So responding like dogs, that would be the Pavlovian conditioning. Some of the kids began to go for the throat. Open rebellion. The early public dances and shows which featured rock were frowned upon by the respectable parents of the community. They did everything they could to shield their impressionable young ones from the ravages of this vulgar new craze. Hal Zeiger, in brackets, is quoted. Quote, they did everything they could to make sure their children were not moved erotically by Negroes, unquote. End of bracket. From the very beginning, the real reason Mr. and Mrs. Clean White America objected to this music was the fact that it was performed by black people. There was always the danger that one night, maybe in the middle of the summer, in a little pink party dress, Janie or Susie might be overwhelmed by the lewd, pulsating jungle rhythms and do something to make their parents ashamed. Parents, in trying to protect their offspring from whatever danger they imagine to be lurking within the secret compartments, holy shit, of this new musical vehicle. Remember in his play in Time magazine, October '69, he says that the concentration camp is run by a little mechanical Colonel Sanders doll in the glove compartment of a Volkswagen bus. And he has it, but then again, he is thinking this. This is a year before he says that. So I'm forgetting. This is not in the 50s. He's saying what he had scripted out in fall of '67 when he says on the liner notes to We're Only for the Money, which doesn't come out for 6 months later, he says, this is due to unpleasant premonitions. That's why he updates Captain Beefheart and meets the grunt people, and they all become robots. That's what he discovered in '67. And he's putting these little conceptual continuous things. I mean, he's saying in '69 they're going to find out when they see this movie that the concentration camp was run by the little doll in the glove compartment of the Volkswagen. He's got it right here. The parents thought, in trying to protect their offspring from whatever danger they imagined to be lurking within the secret compartments of this new musical vehicle, in brackets rock music, actually helped to shove them in front of it, whereupon they were immediately run over. So he's saying that as usual, he get publicity by bringing up the negative or the evil. So in trying to protect their offspring, they killed them. Now this is pretty detached on Frank's part. I mean, he is telling the parents he's trying to help them in some way. He's a double agent. He's working for the parents, for Rational Society, against the chaos of Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead and Bob Dylan. He's trying to tell them, hey, you actually helped to shove them in front of it, this new musical vehicle, whereupon they were immediately run over. The attitude of parents helped to create a climate. There's the hidden ground, an environment, a thunder. The attitude of parents helped to create a climate wherein the usage of rock music, in brackets as a pacifier or perhaps anesthetic experience, became very necessary. Boy, this is getting complex like McLuhan. They created a climate wherein the rock music had to be used as an anesthetic. Parents offered nothing to their children that could match the appeal of rock. It was obvious to the kids that anyone who did not like or attempt to understand, that's in brackets, or attempt to understand rock music had a warped sense of values. To deny rock music was to deny sexuality. Any parent who tried to keep his child from listening to or participating in this musical ritual was, in the eyes of the child, trying to castrate him. And you would include other sensory dynamics, not just the sexual. But that's his title in Freakout, Ritual Dance of a Young Pumpkin or something? No, Ritual Dance of the Child Killer. I think it becomes Ritual Dance of the Young Pumpkin in the Absolutely Free album. Part of the reason I might be stumbling over words, I need a damn drink, but I'm not going to interrupt this. We'll have to go forward. I will suffer. So, in trying to protect their
yes, but,
offspring...
since, the First World War, then the Second World War, and then the Vietnam War, America has always been in war, and McLuhan saw war as another effect of the electric environment. It goes so fast that it's like a response of the speed of innovation.
Politic.
Yeah,
the body politic
so many
has a massive identity crisis.
Appearing, and there has to be a war because it's like the result of all these innovations in technology. And in a way, many parents were against this music, but they were promoting somehow the values that made their children enlist and go to war, or that was seen as something...
Right. Massive identity crisis. Massive identity crisis in all generations. The parents have an identity crisis, they're creating violence, and the kids are having an identity crisis and creating violence, being violent, but they thought it was positive. And Zappa says later, radio is new life. So this is a new life form, a monster that's come into their midst. Right? Like King Kong.
Listen, for example, how come, for example, Zappa didn't have to go to Vietnam?
You know why?
How did he avoid to be...
Good question.
It's a good question, but the answer is obvious.
Sick?
No, you don't remember. He had a record. He got arrested. He got set up in a porno bust, and that saved his ass.
Wow.
Back then, life did him a favor. He had to be there during the Vietnam, the latter half of the second half of the 60s, be out there bugging everybody as a new extension, and he could only have done that by not being eligible for the draft. And that painful bust, while he's in jail for a horrible 10 days, saved his guy, made him be Frank, and within a year or so. That's how he got away with it. He had a record. And back then, they were so fucking purists. What?
Did his father have any influence on that, maybe getting him set up for that?
That's a good point. I don't think so. His father was outraged by the whole thing and supported his son, knew his son was framed and was against it, and helped Frank in some way. But I don't know if people they weren't in the war yet. The war, this was March 65. The war doesn't really get going until 66, 67, I think, in the public mind. There were skirmishes happening in 65. There had been military advisors over there since like 59 or 60. That was after the French had tried to do something, but they gave up. This is before the whole dynamic of the war becoming a big social headache. Frank was luckily busted. Ion. Bob was working. Maybe I set it up. I was very busy back then. I was framing people all over the place. I might have done it. I can't remember. Maybe I did it. Yeah, we were very busy. I couldn't keep track of it all. There was a period there in 65, 66 where I wasn't in touch with Frank. I visited the Cucamonga studio twice, but I was not going there in 65. I wasn't around him when he got busted. So I probably blocked that. I usually blocked the bad stuff I did. So yeah, it's a good case to be made that I set him up. I did that. Or my buddies did it. Somebody was helping me. Somebody was wanting me to get things done, so they had to set Frank up so Frank could help me. Now that could have been ionic. But it's pretty interesting to read this so many years later and see the conceptual continuity he's got here. So he says, there was much resistance on the part of the music industry itself. Now, I know all this because I'm just reading, the past 2 weeks I've been reading Dina Weinstein. She's the widow of Michael Weinstein, who just passed a few months ago. And Weinstein is the main thinker with Croker that made the book, The Data Trash. So I was interested in what she had to say as a sociologist. So she's going through all the details of the history of rock, and so it's fresh in my mind, these things. And she throws in some things that we don't know about. For example, that payola was legal back then. But me and my buddies wanted to bust Elvis, so we declared payola illegal and nailed him and Alan Freed. So I apologize for that, but I'm sure it had a good boomerang side effect that led to everything else that we are thankful for, right? Yes. This is Christmas. Is this Thanksgiving? Are we thankful on Christmas? I can't remember. When do we get thankful? Anyways, there was much resistance on the part of the... There was much...
We just got the gifts. Yeah.
What about the gifts?
To be thankful. The gifts were already given, so...
Yes, we already got the Christmas gift to a young nation. There was much resistance on the part of the music industry itself. Hal Zeiger, quote, says, I remember a conversation with somebody, the initials, a very famous songwriter who has written many of our all-time favorites, wherein he chided me for being involved with this kind of music and entertainment. And I said to him, and he names the initial, you are just upset because it has been discovered and revealed that a song written by some young colored child in a slum area can capture the fancy of the American public more effectively than a song written by you who lives in a Beverly Hills mansion. So he's the war is on, the identity crisis. You are just upset because it has been discovered and revealed that a song written by some young colored child in a slum area. Remember, McLuhan says young kids can change consciousness, can capture the fancy of the American public more effectively than a song written by you who lives in the Beverly Hills mansion. So here's Frank. All he's doing is quoting a conversation from Herbie. Frank's living in a little world. He's just making music. He doesn't go out and socialize. He doesn't have a job. He's not out there. So he can only find out about society by talking to his manager, Herbie Cohen, or a guy who's in the industry, Hal Zeiger. And Hal Zeiger's probably listed on Freakout. So... you see what Frank is quoting his immediate neighborhood for this big life thesis. So, where are we at? Yeah. So then Frank says, every year you could hear people saying, quote, I know it's only a phase. It'll poop out pretty soon. The big bands will come back, unquote. Year after year, the death of rock was predicted, ... or pause. A few times, as I recall, it was even officially announced, officially in italics, quote, rock and roll is dead, calypso is all the rage, unquote. So here's Frank saying this stuff is an environment. His opening statement is, in light of all that, it's necessary. It's a necessary element of contemporary society. It's functional. It's healthy and valid and educational. It's an oracle. So he's talking about it as an environment that can't be stopped by puny opinions. That's McLuhan-esque, right? Right. That's not Theodore Adorno. Yeah. That's not Horkheimer. That's not Herbert Marcuse. That's not Freud. All the guys that Ben Watson quotes have no fucking relevance here. As Kevin Currier, who wrote the book on Zappa called The Dangerous Kitchen, he said, Bob, do the McLuhan thing. Stop Ben Watson's nonsense. And we're doing it more than I even anticipated right here. Right? Right? Who's our yes man tonight? You, Bert? Are you our yes? Yeah, you're Bert. Aren't we making our case that Theodore Adorno is a
very good case? Very good case. Very good.
Yeah. We have our yes men here, and we need backup. But the point is that it's so fucking blatant what Frank is saying McLuhanistically, isn't it? He's talking technically. He's not ranting on about how great rock music is. He's not bringing in his personal opinion. He's talking about the effects in society, making an inventory.
Yeah, doing the McLuhan.
He's what? Doing the McLuhan?
Yeah.
He's doing the McLuhan
thing. Yeah.
All right. No, do not do the sound check environment. What do you call it? The speakeasy, the speakerphone. I can't make out what you're saying. You got to come in. If you're going to say something, say what it is. You have to get every syllable. Right. You have to change. I understand that. But what were you just saying there?
Is that he's doing the McLuhan explorations, the type of exploration, the type of analysis McLuhan does.
Right. And McLuhan McClune would relate it to developments in art history and go through that. Let's see if Zappa brings in musical history. You know what I mean? Is he going to bring in to compare eras, different regions? So that was called that was Rock Around the Clock, which was part of the Big Note Digression 1. Now he says, oh, those great rhythms, digression 2. So is it the great rhythms of the jazz era or of pop and rock and R&B? So, oh, those great rhythms, digression 2. So then he starts explaining again technically. The function of the drums in a rock music ensemble is to keep the beat. In brackets, quote, it has a good beat. I give it 10 points, Dick. He's talking about American Bandstand, Dick Clark. They would measure the song by the beat and give it points. So some teenager on Dick Clark's American Bandstand would be saying, it has a good beat. I give it 10 points. This is actually quoted by Dina Weinstein in her History of American Rock. On early R&B records, the drum part was usually expected... On early R&B records, the drum part was usually executed with brushes. All the arrangements required, generally, was a dull thud on the second and fourth pulse of the bar. There were very few breaks or fills, breaks and fills in quotes. When the drum fill, in brackets, a short percussion outburst, usually at a cadence or resting point of a musical phrase, end of bracket, became popular in rock arrangements, it most often took the form of groups of triplets, in brackets, 3-note rhythmic figures, squeezed into the space of 2 beats, ... sounding like ya-da-da, 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 womp. I don't know if that's how you say it. Ya-da-da, 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 womp. End of bracket. For a while, during the mid-'50s, it seemed like every record produced had one or more fills of this nature in it. Eventually, with the improvements in studios and recording techniques, the drummers began to use sticks on the sessions, and the cadence fills became more elaborate. But before and after the fill, the drummer's job was still to keep the beat. ... That same old crappy beat. ... The beat that made the kids hop around and scream and yell and buy records. Look at that. Throw in the little efficient market. Scream and yell and buy records. A long process of rhythmic evolution has taken place since the early... There it is! Didn't I predict that? That he'd do the phases of art history, in this case music history,
yes,
with technical talk, describing the aspects. I mean, here's Frank Forever, the fucking music teacher. A long process of rhythmic evolution. This is like Bach trying to explain electricity to his buddies over there in Vienna or someplace. Right, Roxy?
Yeah.
He probably wrote for a local newspaper explaining the electric interval. How this is very different from the printing press. A long process of rhythmic evolution has taken place since the early 50s. It is laughable now to think of that dull thud on the second and fourth as lewd and pulsating. So he's pointing at the century shifts made by the technologies. Now he has a section called Green Visors. Isn't that what clerks at gambling joints for? Those little green things on a hat they put over your eyes or something? Green visors? What do you think? Bert, what's a visor?
Yes, the visor. That was the old symbol of the guy in the casino, or
right, or the bureaucrat, or the Delta cards, or took the bets, or some technical. Maybe Frank is being the green visor guy. You know, he's explaining things. I don't know. So it's titled Green Visor. So he begins again with the only guy he knows, Hal Zeiger. He keeps quoting Hal Zeiger. It's like McClune quoting Harold Innis. Zeiger says, the problem at the time was basically this: trying to make the music acceptable, or to try to get the right to expose it. And that took some doing. I knew the kids were listening to the radio stations. Now, this is a guy who's going to do the first rock and roll shows, along with Alan Freed, probably. I knew the kids were listening to the radio stations. It was just a matter of how to merchandise this to get their dollars, too. I told Bill Graham, and he means the founder of the Fillmore and former manager of Jefferson Airplane. So Bill Graham was a household name in 1968. I told Bill Graham, quote, you've got to understand, when these things are underground, that's one thing. But the minute it goes overground, the minute you see it looks like money, everyone wants in, unquote. So then Frank says, so to make R&R, rock and roll, acceptable, the big shots of the record industry hired a bunch of little men with cigars and green visors. Okay, so this is what it is. So he's talking about the Wrecking Crew, the studio musicians, because they're hired to synthesize and imitate the work of the Negroes. So he says, so to make R&R acceptable, the big shots, R&R, isn't that a military term? When you take a break, right? We're going to get some R&R. Yes. So he brings in the metaphor, the military aspect. So to make R&R acceptable, the big shots of the record industry hired a bunch of little men with cigars and green visors to synthesize and imitate the work of the Negroes. The visor men cranked out phony white rock. Highly skilled couriers then delivered the goods to American bandstand along with lots of presents.